Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Lobianco, Director of the LA County Department of Economic Opportunity. Thank you for joining us at today's 2025 LA Wildfires and Economic Update. This is part one of a four-part series on the economic impacts of our recent windstorms and wildfires and the road to recovery. This economic impact study is brought to you by DEO, our team, and the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation's Institute for Applied Economics. And thanks to the investment of our Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development and Labor and Workforce Development Agency and the California Jobs First initiative. Part of a full and community-centered return is truly understanding the loss and needs of our local economy. We are prioritizing information now and over time, which is why we're doing a four-part series. These series will be building, taking into account new data, new analysis, and with feedback from convenings like this one on how to dig in further. So thank you for joining us this morning and being part of this process. But before we dig in on the data, I'm pleased to introduce our county leadership and are just so grateful for all that they've been doing in response to the wildfires, in advancing our recovery, and very pleased to be able to serve alongside them. So I will pass it over to Monica Bankin, who is lead on economic development for Supervisor Barker. Monica, passing to you.
Hello all. Hi, I'm Monica Bankin, Workforce and Economic Development Deputy for LA County Supervisor Catherine Barker, Chair of the Board this year. We're really glad that we have an opportunity here to be able to see some data that I think will really highlight some of the issues that we are working with in terms of recovery and rebuilding issues in the fire impacted areas. You'll get to see some of the differences between the Altadena area versus the Palisades and kind of where those issues are. But you will also be seeing some of the long-term struggles that we will be going through. And that's where we need everyone here's help. And that includes how we rebuild our commercial corridors, how we continue to support the small businesses that are still there. How do we help rebuild small businesses that were home-based businesses? And how do we make these communities a thriving community again? That is our hope and our goal, and it is what Supervisor Barker is working towards. So we appreciate all of you for being on the call today and to learn a little bit more and see how can we all work together for a stronger and a more resilient community in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Appreciate it and very much appreciate Supervisor Barker's leadership. I'm now pleased to introduce Supervisor Lindsay Horvath from our 3rd District. Supervisor, as I was just saying, we are very, very grateful for your leadership in the response to the emergencies in January and leading us on our path to recovery. So passing over to you, Supervisor Horvath.
Thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate your introduction and your department's partnership in supporting our communities who have been recovering from the wildfires, especially with our county relief funds. I know that you've been doing forums, you've provided individual support for our businesses and workforce programs, and all kinds of recovery efforts. So we really thank you for that. I also want to thank our Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development for funding our vital economic opportunity, our economic impact study. And I also want to appreciate Stephen and the team at LAEDC for gathering data and all of your thorough analysis that you'll be presenting today. As we know, the January 2025 fires have caused unprecedented catastrophic devastation throughout Los Angeles communities. In my district alone, we have the entire footprint of the Palisades fire, stretching, of course, from the Pacific Palisades all the way up through Sunset Mesa, Topanga, and Malibu. The Hearst fire, the Kenneth fire, the Sepulveda fire, the Sunset fire, the Woodley fire were all in my district. And we know that across Los Angeles County, too many lives were lost. Families are left without homes and businesses, and so much has been devastating throughout this time. And so communities that were once vibrant are still grappling with securing a stable place to live, determining what steps they want to take moving forward, And so, in response to the tragedy, I witnessed incredible generosity across the globe, with neighbors supporting neighbors all the way, and as I mentioned, support from across, from country to country. So, to meet this tremendous need, I know the county itself stood up 3 funds to provide financial assistance, and to date, over $52 million in direct cash grants have been distributed to workers, to residents, to small businesses and nonprofits to meet immediate needs until other resources were available. While we know that sounds like a lot, we know there's so much more need out there. Of the amount that the county has secured in that 52 million, the county identified and allocated over 32 million of that for these funds. So complementing the county funds, we stood up in our office the Malibu Topanga Business Interruption Fund, providing grants to small businesses impacted by PCH and Topanga Canyon Boulevard road closures following the Palisades fire. I know the county and all levels of government have collaborated to expeditiously stand up large-scale relief efforts to meet the multiple and complicated needs that our neighbors are facing. And there have been outside efforts as well. And so we just really appreciate the generosity that has emerged and that spirit of togetherness and collaboration because we are stronger when we work together. And I do appreciate the collaboration with community partners and our colleagues across government. Due to these partnerships, the county led the fastest post-disaster wildfire cleanup in U.S. history, thanks to our partnership with FEMA, U.S. EPA, and the Army Corps of Engineers. And so building on the success, we're focused on a full long-term recovery of every neighborhood that has been destroyed by our fires. The scale of destruction is unprecedented, so our response must be in kind. And so building back homes is not good enough. We have to build back all of the things that make community feel like community. The businesses that you love to patronize, houses of worship, community centers, treasured public spaces, and so much more. We know there's tremendous impact in the fire footprints, and there will also be significant economic disruption across the region. So the faster we get people back up and running, the more it will impact in a positive way everyone who has been so devastated by these efforts. So this series of webinars provides the necessary data and information to inform our recovery, to ensure it's equitable and ensure that resilience is the name of the game in the face of future disasters. So thank you all for coming together, for the work that we will do in partnership with one another going forward, and for all that you have done to strengthen Los Angeles County in these very difficult times.
Thank you, Supervisor. We very, very much appreciate your North Star in our recovery and all of your efforts. And thank you for being with us here today as we kick off our Economic Impact Series. Appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to give a quick update on Department of Economic Opportunity and then pass over to LAEDC to help us dig in. So as you know, I represent the Los Angeles County Department of Economic Opportunity. We create quality jobs, help small businesses and high road employers start and grow, and build vibrant communities and spaces. When it comes to moments like these, we lead on economic recovery planning within the county when we're faced with emergencies, health, environmental, or economic disruption and uncertainty. That includes activating the board's recently released Blueprint for Recovery and other long-term planning related to the wildfires. As you've heard from Supervisor Horvath and Monica from Supervisor Barger's team, we've been very busy in the last 9 months in our response and recovery. Our department has been sharing critical information and resources, being at the disaster recovery centers, hosting LA Region small business forums, providing the relief that Supervisor Horvath lifted up. We know cash assistance is needed in those early phases and throughout every phase of rebuild and recovery. Launching job training and paid work experiences for over 1,000 impacted workers through our fire recovery and resiliency program, and already starting to build the surge capacity needed for a thoughtful rebuild through our high road training partnership programs. And right now we know making sure that folks are stable so that we can recover is important. We've also launched our Shop Local, Dine Local, and Recover Local campaign that will lead into broader campaigns that ensure that we continue to invest in our impacted workers, small businesses, and communities. So thank you all for being here, being part of this process with us. And just know you can always visit the Department of Economic Opportunity at the One Stop Permit Center. We are opening an Alternate Job Center today in our Office of Small Businesses there to continue to provide that one-on-one support that you need. And with that, thank you. And I will pass over to Stephen Chung from LAEDZ to get us started.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, this is Stephen Chung, CEO for the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. I want to thank again Kelly, Monica, Supervisor Horvath, Supervisor Barger, and the entire LA County team for your partnership, as well as the Governor's Office of Economic and Business Opportunity to allow us to work closely together to really address some of the major concerns that we're having here. LADC, for over the last 7 to 8 months, have been working tirelessly to support both workers and businesses across Los Angeles County. And through our workforce development team, we've been partnering with DEO and AGCCs to connect fire-impacted workers with employers like UCLA, Human IT, Apple One, Latino Restaurant Association, and LAX. And as Kelly mentioned, together with Logo Empower Mission, Cal OES, and DEO, we're able to engage over 1,000 job seekers for more than 2,400 affected families at a major relief event in Pasadena. And on the business side, we've actually hosted business recovery centers in Pasadena, Malibu, Altadena, guiding business owners on accessing capital, building resilience, and moving to digital commerce, with several more planned in the coming months. So please stay tuned. We're also launching a business resource repository this fall to provide practical tools on capital procurement, permitting, and insurance, and also to help businesses reopen and thrive. We're very happy to partner with Kelly on the Shop LA, Shop Local, Dine Local, and Recover Local campaigns. This will lead into the LA is open for business, because a lot of our partners outside of the Los Angeles region, they don't know how big LA is. So sometimes they get the wrong impression that LA is not open for business. So we need to continue to work on this campaign. And finally, in addition to the funds that the supervisor and Kelly were mentioning, LADC was able to receive about $500,000 from Fire Aid LA, and we'll be distributing that. The application is open on our website, and it'll be closing. The application process will be closing at the end of the month. So if you want more information, please go to ladc.org. We'll be partnering very closely with Kelly and DEO to make sure we're able to continue to provide that support to our partners as well. Together, we're committed to rebuilding stronger and more resilient community. And first, we need to start by understanding the impact. And that's why this series of events is going to be so important for us to quantify the impact. And with that, I would like to introduce Shannon Sedgwick, the Senior Director for the Institute for Applied Economics at LADC, who will be providing the updated information and the reports so that we can get a better sense. And thank you so much again, Kelly. Thank you so much, Supervisor Barger, Supervisor Horvath, Monica, Susan, Kevin. All of you guys have been amazing partners, and we need to basically come together in order for us to overcome the challenges that we have. With that, I'll pass it to Shannon.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Stephen said, I'm Shannon Sedgwick, Senior Director of the Institute for Applied Economics at LADC. We're honored to lead this work on behalf of Los Angeles County and in collaboration with our partners at the Department of Economic Opportunity. Together, we're advancing a coordinated, data-driven approach to support recovery and long-term resilience for the communities, workers, and businesses affected by the recent wildfires. The research component of this work is an economic analysis where we are systematically assessing the effects of the Eaton and Palisades wildfires on businesses, workers, industry sectors, and demographics, with a specific focus on equity, industry, and geographic disparities. This briefing is the first in a series of 4 quarterly updates where we share data, trends, and insights. And our aim is to equip policymakers, state and county partners, and community stakeholders with information they need to make informed decisions and to guide resources where they are most needed. This briefing is not a one-time snapshot. Each quarter, we will produce an updated assessment of the economic impacts and key recovery metrics, share them through these briefings, and provide you all with actionable insights to help guide your decision-making. The quarterly approach allows us to track how recovery is evolving over time, identify where resources may still be needed, and then adjust strategies as conditions change. And at the conclusion of the series, we'll deliver a comprehensive economic impact analysis report, comprehensively presenting the impacts of the LA wildfires with policy recommendations to support long-term resilience and disaster mitigation planning. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Thank you. So shortly after the wildfires in January, we wanted to get an understanding of not only the impact of the damage, but how businesses in the burn areas were affected and how that would impact our economy. We leveraged that initial analysis and are building upon that in this work that follows, identifying secondary fire areas where additional businesses experience disruptions, compounding the economic impact on what we originally identified. Here's what we'll cover in today's section or session. First, we'll start with we'll walk through socioeconomic profile of Eaton and Palisade burn areas to better understand the communities impacted. Then we'll share our initial impact estimates from earlier this year and provide an expanded set of estimates addressing activity impacted within that secondary fire area. We'll then review a few wildfire recovery indicators. These include metrics like insurance claims, rental price changes, permits issued, real estate listings and sales. And finally, we'll close with a brief overview of what's to come next and a Q&A session. Next slide. Now I'm going to pass it over to the Institute's Senior GIS Research Analyst, Matthew Skyberg, to go over the socioeconomics of Eaton and Palisades burn areas. Matthew?
All right, thank you, Shannon. So first, we're going to start by taking a look at these areas that were affected by the Eaton and Palisades wildfires. So as we can see, the scope of the burn areas, which are shown in yellow, and the broader secondary fire areas that are shown in light purple on the maps. In the Palisades, the burn area covered about 22 square miles with just over 21,000 residents and nearly 9,000 households. And the secondary fire area for Palisades is about twice that size at 43 square miles and includes nearly 36,000 residents and more than 15,000 households. The Eaton burn area was even larger. It covered 38 square miles with almost 23,000 residents and almost 8,800 households. But the secondary fire area for Eaton was even larger, or more than double that footprint. So that was 88 square miles and a much bigger population of nearly 96,000 residents and over 35,000 households. So it's important to note that the secondary fire areas that we've identified represent the maximum extent of the mandatory evacuation orders. So not just evacuation warnings, but mandatory orders to evacuate. So this means these were the neighborhoods that were heavily disrupted, even if they were not directly in the burn footprint. So the burn areas capture the communities most directly damaged, while secondary fire areas represent a much larger group affected by evacuations, disruptions, and longer-term recovery. Next slide. So we'll start by taking a look at the socioeconomic characteristics of the burn areas first, so we can get a better understanding of the residents that were affected by these fires. So in the Palisades, the burn area population includes about 80% white residents, and both Hispanic and Asian residents make up around 7% each of the population. So this is a community with large share of older residents. 43% are over the age of 45. And education levels are very high, with nearly 78% of residents holding a bachelor's degree or higher. Median household income is around $200,000, and home values average nearly $2 million. The Palisades is characterized by high home ownership, and many residents commute to white-collar jobs outside the area. So that means that recovery efforts must account for disruptions to both households and also their professional livelihoods. The Eaton burn area shows a slightly different profile. It's highly diverse, with Hispanic residents making up 28%, Black residents make up 19%, and white residents make up about 44% of the population. This translates to a diversity index of 83.7, which is very high. The education levels remain strong, with nearly 58% of residents holding a bachelor's degree or higher. Median household income here is about $143,000, with average home values closer to $1.2 million. So Eaton has a more balanced age distribution and relies more heavily on external job centers, which shapes the kind of recovery challenges that this community is going to face. So in summary, Palisades represents a more established, homeowner-oriented community with strong education and professional ties, while Eaton reflects a dynamic, diverse, and mixed income community that depends more heavily on commuting and service-oriented jobs. So each is going to require tailored strategies to ensure that recovery meets their distinct needs. Next slide. So now we'll take a look at the demographics of the secondary fire areas, which again represents the maximum extent of mandatory evacuation orders. So in the Palisades, the secondary fire area is slightly more diverse than the burn area, with a diversity index of 46.2. Population includes about 79% white residents, 8% Hispanic, and 7% Asian. This area is large share of older residents. 83% are adults, age 18 plus, and many are age 45 and over. Education levels are still very high, with more than 75% of residents holding a bachelor's degree or higher, and median household income is about $179,000, and the average home values are closer to 1.9 million. So like the perimeter, the Palisades secondary area is characterized by white-collar workers and heavy commuting. The Eaton secondary fire area is also large and still highly diverse, where white residents make up about 49%, Hispanic residents make up 25%, and Asian residents make up 19%, and Black residents are at 6%. Diversity index is still high at 80.7, although slightly lower than the perimeter, but still very high. Education levels are strong. 62% of residents hold a bachelor's degree or higher. Median household income is about $156,000, and average home values are around 1.4 million. So Eaton shows a more mixed industries, but still has a strong reliance on commuting to job centers outside of the area. So in summary, compared to burn areas, the secondary fire area is brought in the picture. Palisades shows a slightly more diversity and somewhat lower incomes in the burn area. Well, Eaton is the opposite, where it shows slightly higher incomes, but lower diversity in the secondary fire area compared to the burn area. So these differences highlight the importance of considering both the core burn areas and the broader evacuated communities when planning recovery. Next slide. So looking beyond the socioeconomics, we also examine the structural damage using CAL FIRE damage inspection data. The property damage in both fire areas was extensive. In Palisades, just over 12,000 structures were assessed, and of these, nearly 57% were destroyed, while another 8% sustained varying levels of damage, and only about a third were left undamaged. In Eaton burn area, nearly 18,500 structures were assessed, with 51% destroyed and another 6% sustaining partial damage. About 43% in the Eaton area were left intact. So in both communities, more than half the structures were lost, which is a devastating level of destruction that displaced thousands of residents and destroyed entire neighborhoods. Next slide. So when we break down the types of structures that were destroyed across both fire areas, we can start to see the scale of loss. So across both areas, residential losses dominate. More than 11,600 homes were destroyed, including over 11,000 single-family homes and about 230 multifamily residences. On top of that, nearly 100 school structures were lost and 15 church structures were lost, along with key pieces of infrastructure. On the commercial side, roughly 200 commercial structures were lost and 8 mixed-use structures were destroyed. And then finally, more than 4,200 utility and miscellaneous structures, which are typically non-habitable buildings tied to residential properties, were also lost. So altogether, that's over 16,000 structures destroyed, with housing representing the overwhelming majority. But the damage goes far beyond residences, touching schools, churches, businesses, and infrastructure. And that just shows that recovery isn't just about rebuilding homes, but it's about restoring the entire community fabric. Digging in a little bit deeper on the two fire areas separately, Eaton saw the greatest share of residential damage. They lost over 6,000 homes, including more than 5,100 single-family residences and 64 multifamily structures. Schools were also heavily affected, with 46 school structures destroyed, along with losses to churches, commercial buildings, and infrastructure. The Palisades was just slightly smaller in scale, but experienced a more varied pattern of loss. In addition to the more than 5,000 homes destroyed, the area also lost 51 school structures, several churches, and a mix of commercial and community serving buildings. So while Eaton's losses were concentrated in larger single-family development, the Palisades experienced some more diverse impacts across housing types, schools, and community structures. And together, these impacts underscore the complexity of recovery. In Eaton, restoring large neighborhoods and key schools will be central, while in Palisades, recovery also has to account for the broad mix of community and housing needs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Justin Adams, to discuss the business disruptions.
Thanks, Matthew. Good morning, everyone. So today I'm going to focus on business disruptions, which really form the basis of our economic impact analysis of the LA wildfires. So we've since the spring we've broadened our scope to capture additional business disruptions beyond the primary burn areas, and that provides a more comprehensive view of the fire's regional economic effects. Next slide, please. Okay, so let me first recap our findings for businesses that are directly within the burn areas. So as we previously noted, we identified 1,863 individual businesses that were located within the Palisades and Eaton burn areas. These businesses employed 9,610 people and generated an estimated 1.4 billion in annual sales revenue. And I should point out that these businesses likely do not include home-based businesses, so the actual numbers are probably larger than this. You can see, though, that of these nearly 1,900 impacted businesses, relatively more were located in the Palisades fire area. So about 60% of the impacted businesses were in the Palisades, with 62% of affected employees and 71% of revenue. By contrast, the Eaton fire burn area had 40% of impacted businesses, which represented 38% of affected employees and 29% of revenue. So these figures, they represent the most severely affected businesses, those that experienced direct fire damage, and these are the ones that face the longest recovery timelines. Next slide, please. So our expanded analysis now includes businesses in the secondary fire areas, and these are zones that experienced significant wildfire impacts, but not direct fire damage. So these areas were defined by evacuation orders, so mandatory evacuation orders. So these areas suffered smoke damage, road closures, and other fire-related disruptions. But this expanded scope reveals a much larger economic footprint. So more than 5,000 individual businesses were located in these secondary areas, and they employed over 37,000 people and generated about 6.8 billion in annual sales. And notably, the distribution pattern here, it differs significantly from the burn areas. So here, the Eaton secondary fire area contains about 76% of affected businesses, accounting for 75% of employees and 74% of revenue. The Palisades secondary area represents 24% of businesses, 25% of employees, and 26% of revenue. Next slide, please. So looking at this breakdown of affected businesses in the burn area broken down by industry, you can see the concentration of impact across different sectors. So among the 1,479 businesses that reported detailed employment and industry data, you can see the largest affected sector was other services except public administration, with 235 total companies. So this sector includes activities such as personal care services, automotive repair and maintenance, dry cleaning and laundry services, pet care services, and grant making and giving services. We also see significant numbers in professional, scientific, and technical services, retail trade, and in healthcare and social assistance. What's important to note here is that many of these impacted businesses are in consumer-facing industries. So these are ones that directly serve their neighborhoods. And so this has implications for the speed at which they can rebound. Next slide, please. So the secondary fire areas present a similar industry distribution to the burn areas, but at a much larger scale. So among the 4,320 businesses that reported detailed data, we again see concentrations in other services except public administration, with 650 total companies, professional, scientific, and technical services, with 625 companies, and retail trade with 455 companies. One difference here, though, is that educational services appears on this list of impacted industries, replacing administrative and support and waste management services. And this is likely because the expanded footprint now captures a number of colleges and universities in addition to primary and secondary schools. The other major difference is that the Eaton secondary fire area dominates most categories, which was consistent with our overall findings about the broader geographic impact of the Eaton fire's secondary effects. So this suggests that while the Palisades experienced more concentrated direct damage, the Eaton fire potentially created wider reaching business disruptions across the region. Next slide, please. So this chart provides a bit of context for understanding the relative significance of direct versus secondary fire impacts in our economic impact analysis. So while the secondary fire areas contain businesses with much higher total revenue, so 6.8 billion compared to 1.4 billion in the burn areas, the enduring economic impact comes primarily from the businesses in the burn areas. So the key distinction here lies in disruption duration and severity. So businesses that were located in the burn areas experienced significant physical damage that could interrupt their operations for months or even years. And some of these businesses have to be completely rebuilt. So they face the full recovery of recovery challenges, including things like insurance negotiations, permitting processes, construction timelines, and then actually rehiring workers. So in contrast, the companies in the secondary fire areas, while they are still significantly affected, they experienced less severe damage. So primarily from smoke, temporary evacuations, and access restrictions. So most of these businesses could reopen within days or weeks once immediate safety concerns were addressed and any infrastructure was restored. But it's still important to note that the 6.8 billion in secondary area revenue potentially represents substantial short-term economic disruption. While these businesses may recover more quickly, their temporary closure during the crisis, it did contribute significantly to economic losses and supply chain disruptions throughout the region. Okay, next slide, please. So with that, I will now turn the presentation over to my colleague, economist Dr. Dan Way, and she will discuss our expanded economic impact estimates. So Dan?
Thank you, Justin. So next, I will present our economic impact analysis conducted for both the burn areas and the secondary affected areas of the Eden and Palisades wildfire. Next slide, please. Okay, so first for the burn areas, we conducted an initial impact analysis of business disruptions in our March report. So first, I would like to give a very brief summary of the estimated impacts for the burn areas. The study focused on a 5-year period spanning from 2025 to 2029 to capture the potential short to medium-term impacts on the LA County economy. So a key challenge of this analysis is the uncertainty around recovery timelines. Delays in recovery spending, insurance payouts, shortages of labor, and building materials could all slow the rebuilding process. So in order to address this uncertainty issue, we developed 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 follows estimated median repair and reconstruction timelines for damaged buildings by damage level and building occupancy type according to FEMA's disaster damage and impact assessment model. Then in scenario 2, we double those timelines reflecting potential financial, permitting, or resource challenges. And then in scenario 3, we triple the timelines to represent the most challenging rebuilding and recovery process. So across all of these 3 scenarios, the initial or immediate direct economic losses in 2025 in those burn areas associated with business disruptions are estimated to be about $1.26 billion in lost revenue, along with a loss of 8,200 jobs. So this represents a decline of roughly 85 to 90% of the baseline levels. And in terms of the recovery trajectory under each scenario, so you can see the chart on this slide. It shows that for scenario 1, it represents the fastest rebound, so reaching full recovery by 2028. And then in scenario 2, recovery is slower with 12 to 15% of losses persisting in 2029, and the recovery delayed to 2032. And finally, in scenario 3, which represent the most prolonged recovery process, we still see about 30 to 35% losses after 5 years, so pushing full recovery further out to 2034. Next slide, please. Okay, so based on these recovery scenarios, this slide presents the estimated total economic impacts of business disruptions in the burn areas, which go beyond the direct impacts and capture the ripple effects through the supply chain linkages and household spending effects. So over the next 5 years, the total economic output losses are estimated to range from $4.6 to $8.9 billion. Employment losses range from almost 25,000 to 49,100 job years, with corresponding labor income losses of $1.9 to $3.7 billion. Additionally, federal, state, and local tax losses are estimated between $0.73 to $1.41 billion. So across all scenarios, direct losses make up roughly 50 to 60% of the total, reflecting the immediate damages and disruptions to affected businesses within the burn areas. Then the remaining 40 to 45% arises from the ripple effects across the entire county. So suppliers, contractors, employees, and local consumer spendings are all impacted by the reduced business activities. Next slide, please. Okay, so we also estimated the total economic impacts of business disruptions in the secondary fire areas that extend beyond their immediate operations. So in the baseline, operation of these businesses generate a nearly $11.8 billion in annual output and support about 61,000 jobs, creating more than $4.8 billion in labor income in Los Angeles County. So in order to conduct the analysis for the secondary fire areas, we first estimate business downtime under the evacuation orders. During the Eden fire, evacuation orders ranged from 3 to 17 days across various neighborhoods, with an assumed average of 10 days of evacuation in our analysis. And then in Palisades, evacuations lasted between 3 and 30 days, with an assumed average of 15 days of evacuation in our analysis. Next slide. Once evacuation orders are lifted, businesses rarely bounce back right away, even they did not experience any property damages. So many of those businesses face cleanup, safety checks, and challenges such as staffing shortages and slower return of customer demand. So the recovery timelines also vary by industry, depending on their reliance on in-person customers, the ability to work remotely, and the type of business operations. Because the recovery timeline is uncertain, so we once again model two scenarios, a shorter and a longer disruption windows, each with industry-specific assumptions for the secondary fire areas. The chart on this slide shows how this works for one example industry. Basically, we assume all businesses are fully disrupted during the evacuation period. And then after the evacuations end, business operations in the secondary fire areas are assumed to follow a gradual linear recovery back to the normal level. Next slide. So here's a summary of the estimated economic impacts of business interruptions in the secondary fire areas. Under the shorter disruption scenario, total impacts include $625 million in output losses, 3,250 job years affected. So all employment impacts in our analysis are analyzed and reported in job years. So results are comparable across scenarios, industries, and regions. And we also estimated labor income losses of about $250 million. And total tax revenue losses are estimated to be around $120 million in combined federal, state, and local taxes. And then in the longer disruption scenario, the impacts nearly double. So total output losses rise to about $1.2 billion, 6,140 job years affected, with labor income losses approach $473 million. Fiscal impacts rise to nearly $234 million in lost tax revenues. So once again, the direct losses account for roughly 60% of the total, with remaining 40% stemming from ripple effects across the entire county economy. Next slide. Okay, so on this slide, we summarize the combined economic impacts across both the burn areas and the secondary fire areas. So in the burn areas, businesses suffered direct property damage and major economic disruptions. These communities face a multi-year rebuilding and recovery process with long-lasting effects on jobs, income, and local spending. In the secondary fire areas, businesses did not suffer direct property damages, but they were affected by temporary evacuations and recovery-related interruptions in 2025. These impacts are relatively shorter in duration compared to the impacts in the burn areas. When we combine the economic impacts across these areas, the total impacts varies depending on which recovery and disruption scenarios we apply. So altogether, the estimated losses are significant. ranging from about $5.2 to $10.1 billion in economic output, 28,240 to 55,250 job years of employment, $2.2 to $4.2 billion in labor income losses, and up to $1.64 billion in lost federal, state, and local tax revenues. So all of these results indicate that the longer the recovery takes, the greater the economic losses will be. So the speed and effectiveness of the recovery efforts will determine how quickly the local economy can recover and rebound. Next slide. Okay, so with that, I will pass it over to my colleague Max, who is going to discuss latest information on wildfire recovery indicators.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. My name is Max Thomas, and I'll be presenting analysis on several recovery indicators from the wildfire. Next slide, please. The first indication of recovery we'll look at is insurance claims related to the wildfire. Using data from the California Department of Insurance as of May 12, 2025, we calculated that 94% of the insurance claims made were paid out for a total of $17.1 billion. Of the approximately 45,000 claims made, 80%, or 35,700 claims, were for residential properties. Looking at the chart on the right-hand side of the screen, we can see that about 94% of the amount paid for insurance claims is attributable to residential properties, with much less of the payout belonging to commercial properties and automobiles. The California Department of Insurance also reports that about 65% of the amount paid for insurance claims is for properties in the Palisades fire area, with most of the remaining amount going towards properties in the Eaton fire area. Next slide, please. We also looked at how Los Angeles was progressing in removing debris from the fire. Debris removal is essential because rebuilding can only begin once debris has been removed from the affected area. When applying for debris removal, residents had the option of choosing free federal debris removal from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or opting for a private party to conduct debris removal. At 7 months from the wildfire's end, we calculated that debris had been removed for 95% of parcels that have been destroyed or majorly damaged. Relative to other recent fires, such as the Marshall Fire in Colorado or the Maui Fire in Hawaii, Los Angeles is doing well regarding debris removal and appears to be keeping pace with the debris removal effort for the Carr Fire in California. More recently, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has signed off on nearly all parcels as being cleared of debris, while some parcels using private contractors continue their debris removal efforts. Next slide, please. Next, we'll focus on the speed and quantity of building permits issued by governments whose constituents were impacted by the fire. Focusing on building permit issuance is important because the rebuilding process can only begin on a property once building permits are issued. Recently, we counted that 798 general purpose building permits, such as permits for homes, pools, detached accessory structures, or fence building or repairs, have been issued to residents impacted by the wildfires. The average time from application date to issuance date for these permits was 52 business days. To compare Los Angeles' progress to other recent wildfires, we'll specifically look at the number of building permits issued to rebuild a destroyed residential building, divided by the number of destroyed residential buildings in the fire. This quotient is displayed as a percentage in the table on the right-hand side of the screen. As we can see, governments in Los Angeles have issued rebuilding permits for about 3% of the residential buildings destroyed in the fire. This number is more in the middle relative to recent fires, at 7 months from the wildfire's end. However, every wildfire seems to have its own recovery path. 3 years after the end of other wildfires, some areas had experienced robust growth in rebuild permits, while others did not. Next slide, please. I'll now discuss how rent changed in response to the wildfires throughout the county. The story that permeated the discourse is that areas outside the wildfire's perimeter would experience rent increases due to increased demand from fire refugees. To explore this possibility, we measured changes in rent using the Zillow Observed Rental Index, or ZORI, which are represented as blue dots in the upper graph on the slide. ZORI is a dollarized index that measures the middle rental price in a geographic area while keeping the quality of housing in that area constant over time. As ZORI is a middle price, it is not representative of rents in the upper and lower parts of the rental price distribution. As we can see in the upper graph, the middle rent was increasing in Los Angeles County over 2024. To look at what happened to rents in 2025, we'll use this upward trend from 2024 as a comparison. Specifically, we measured whether 2025 rents kept the same upward trend as in 2024 or deviated from this trend. To make this measurement, we detrended the upper graph by subtracting the red line from the blue dots to produce the blue line on the lower graph, whose height is the detrended value. As we can see, when the fire occurred in January 2025, there was a slight short-term increase in the middle rent for LA County. However, by 6 months from the end of the wildfire in June, the middle rent in the county had cooled below its 2024 trend. Next slide. While there was not a large increase in the index countywide, increases may be more pronounced for areas near the fire perimeter, as wildfire refugees attempt to stay in an area near their original home. To explore this, we looked at a zip code level ZORI by distance from the wildfire's perimeter. For example, the red line in the graph on the right is a representative middle rental price for all zip codes within 5.5 miles of either the Eaton or Palisades fire perimeter. The graph on the right shows that there was a significant short-term increase in the middle rent for zip codes closer to the wildfire's perimeter. This is evidence that many wildfire refugees attempted to remain close to their original home. However, looking at the graph 6 months from the wildfire's end, we can see that zip codes closer to the fire's perimeter have had their middle rent return to trend, while further away zip codes have seen their middle rent fall below the 2024 trend. In the future, we hope to decipher which zip codes drove this rental increase and discover common characteristics among them. Next slide, please. Next, we will look at the number of housing listings in the burn area versus the listings in non-burn areas. Looking at the graph on the right, where each point on the line represents the year-to-year percentage change in total monthly housing listings between January and June, there does not seem to be evidence of long-term flight of residents from the area. We concluded this because the year-over-year increase between 2024 and 2025 in the burn area tracks with the listing increase for non-burn areas, suggesting that there does not appear to be a unique surge in housing listings for the burn area alone. Further, housing listings in the burn area comprised 8.7% of all county listings in the first 6 months of 2025, which aligns with the historical trends for zip codes in this area. Next slide, please. Finally, we will examine how housing sales in the burn area have responded to the wildfire. Looking at the graph on the right, where each bar's height represents the number of housing sales that occurred in the burn area in that specified year, we do not see strong evidence of a spike in housing sales occurring in the first 5 months of 2025 relative to previous years, which indicates no long-term flight from the region. However, for the January through May period, the burn area did see low housing sales in 2025, at 230 sales compared to a recent historic average between 249 and 550 sales. Specifically, housing sales during the January through May period in 2025 are 8% lower than in 2024, and 7.6% lower than in 2023. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll turn things back over to Shannon.
Thank you, Dr. Chamas. So looking ahead, we'll continue tracking economic recovery indicators, including business impacts, workforce displacement, future workforce needs for the recovery process, and housing and infrastructure restoration. All of this will be presented over the next 3 quarterly briefings and ultimately the comprehensive economic impact report that we hope will serve as a roadmap for long-term resilience planning. At this point, I'd like to open the floor for questions about our findings and our approach moving forward. We have a question from Julie. Does ZORI rely exclusively on data from rentals advertised on Zillow? Max?
I believe the answer is yes. It would just be all the rental housing data that they personally have access to, including like the various amenities available there as well.
Okay. We had several questions on whether the presentation will be available. And so just to let you all know, we do plan on posting a copy of the slides and a recording of this webinar on our website this week. Will you provide home-based business data in the future? It is one of the things that we're looking to incorporate that would be released in one of our future webinars. Regarding secondary area, did LADC also consider the economic upside of receiving displaced people? For example, the city of Chico financially benefited from receiving displaced people from Palisades. Some findings also suggest that Conejo Valley benefited from receiving displaced folks from Malibu. So once population data is released at the beginning of the year, it gives us a chance to assess resident population changes in the surrounding areas, and that can point towards additional activity that's related to the migration, and we can take a look at that once that data is available. Let's see. Can you detail housing or land sales between Palisades and Eaton fire areas? I heard higher in Eaton, specifically Altadena, but have no data.
I think we can do that actually, and that's something to look into in the future. Off the top of my head, I can't remember right now which one had the higher housing sales than the other, but it is something we should report in the future. It's a good point.
Then we have how are business losses in the secondary area calculated, specifically those businesses that closed due to the impacts of the fire area? Dr. Wei, do you want to recap again?
Oh, so for now, we mainly looked at the evacuation time period. So in that period, we assume 100% disruption to any business activities. And then we also look at the recovery timeline and made specific assumptions for different industries, because some of the industries associated with some critical services like utilities, healthcare, those services we assume to return back to operations more quickly. But some of the customer-facing industries like retail and restaurant food services, those services may face longer recovery in those evacuation areas as well, because there are declines in customers, and other challenges, staffing shortages, that will all affect the impacts for those businesses. But at the moment, we have not looked at detailed information about changes in foot traffic, but we are going to do that in the following analysis.
Julie asked, can you explain how units damaged by significant smoke, soot, and toxic ash were categorized?
So the CAL FIRE damage inspection data actually doesn't include units that were affected by smoke or soot or toxic ash. They're only looking at structural damage. So that was not included in their assessment.
And we understood that part of the reason why we were looking at a secondary fire area was that we understood that the damage, specifically smoke damage and impacts to businesses, were taking place beyond that initial burn area. So we're trying to capture the economic activity associated with that. In the future, we also plan to look at changes in activity levels. So we're able to do that. All the location services on your cell phones, it creates a big data set that allows us to look at foot traffic or visitor spending and activity levels. So we can do a comparison, and it can also not only speak to a little bit about the impacts of the road closures along these areas that maybe weren't evacuated, or the road closures that extended beyond the evacuation periods, but also take a look at the lingering effects of the wildfires on activity levels as well. I think we're pretty close to time, so I'm going to go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. So thank you again for your time and your continued partnership and engagement in this effort. This work is only made possible because of the collaboration between GoBiz, LADC, DEO, and our many other state, county, and community partners. So we will continue to provide quarterly updates so that together we can monitor progress and adjust strategies and make sure that LA County builds back stronger, more equitable, and more resilient. Next slide. Okay. That concludes our webinar for today. If you have additional questions, feel free to submit, and we will put the webinar recording and a copy of the slide deck up on our website within the next day or two. Thank you so much for joining us.